As a small business being customer-centric, for the majority of our history, we were really focused on customers. So we had the core technology and we had really a core customer base, and we sort of worked with them to kind of refine and tweak products to make them meet specific customers' need. But more recently, as we've kind of gotten more of an outward focus and more of a growth mindset, we've dived pretty deeply into developing our core technology and looking at what's going to help keep us relevant for the next 66 years.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari Santiago. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. I have Alex Smith with me today, the general manager of Swift Textile Metalizing, or STM, right here in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Alex, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Ari.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure, Alex, and it is the Made in America podcast. So we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we manufacture metal-plated, electrically conductive fabrics right here in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And they're really used for just an incredible array of applications. So anywhere you need something which is lightweight, flexible, and electrically conductive. So we're supporting the aerospace industry, medical, telecommunications, and some niche kind of consumer applications as well. So.
And why do you guys do it? What's the backstory, man? Why are you guys into this business?
So it's really, we kind of stumbled into it back in the 50s, actually. So the company's been around for 66 years now. It really stemmed out of a need that the Army had following World War II. So during post-war period, there was this nifty invention called radar, something that we kind of take for granted now. But it was this, completely novel technology back then. And the Army needed something which was electrically reflective that they could see on radar to train radar operators. There was no such thing as a targeting drone at that point. If you needed to see something and train somebody how to shoot at it, you kind of wanted there not to be a pilot in it at that point. So no drones, they needed something that they could see. And so they looked to us and kind of the predecessor to the company to come up with a technology that could do that.
And that technology was invented and created, and here we are 66 years later.
66 years later, and technologies just sort of continue to evolve, and we've always sort of found a niche that's kept us relevant, and here we are.
That's great. Listen, there's a rich history with Swift that dates even further back than the 50s. I got a personal connection. I think it's a really interesting story. I look forward to talking about that. I also want to talk about you talked a little bit about staying relevant, and I think when people hear Swift Textile Metalizing or anything textile in the U.S., let alone the Northeast U.S., there's a little bit of eyebrow raise, like really. And so I do want to talk about that. But before we sort of get into the business and sort of what you guys are up to. Kind of like to go in the personal background a little bit. So let's kind of start with you, Alex. How did you get into the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in the way things work and the way things are made. I was the kid who was like, got the old broken printer and was taking it apart to see all the pieces that went into that. I'm sure that's very relatable. So I've loved mechanical things and seeing things made. So when I graduated college, this was really my first real job out of college, and got kind of introduced to manufacturing through starting quality assurance as a data analyst, basically. And just from day one, it was kind of an interesting challenge right out of college, but just, again, tapping into that deep-seated passion for just seeing the way things are made. I just sort of got under my skin, and it stuck with me. So
and just build your career from there.
Yeah.
And so did you start at Swift?
Yeah.
So this has been a lifelong career. I mean, you probably got more years ahead than behind, but still, it's been a lifelong career. So did you sort of seek out when you went to school? Were you thinking about getting into manufacturing?
Nope. So I'm one of those people who started somewhere and ended somewhere totally different. So my undergrad was in nutrition and biological sciences, and did a lot of meta-analysis work when I was in school. So looking at food and nutrition studies, and then doing meta-analysis on those. And then, data is data. Company needed somebody to really take the leap and jump from paper records, which is what they had been on for 60 some odd years worth of history, to maybe we should be doing things a little bit more digitally and getting involved in really taking all that old manufacturing data, turning it into something that was meaningful, and then digitizing moving forward.
So how did you get introduced? I mean, was this one of those just like, hey, I saw an ad on Indeed type of thing? Like, how did you get introduced to the?
Pretty much.
Really?
Yep.
That's really cool.
Took a flyer on it and
it worked out.
And it worked out.
Were you, just one of the things we're always talking about is workforce development, and I know we're going to get into that as well. It's something I'm sure it's near and dear to your heart, as it is to everybody's. But it's just interesting, very few people that sort of come through here kind of had that connection. And so when you looked at the ad, what was sort of interesting to you about it, given that it was kind of pretty far afield from what you had studied?
Like I said, I've always liked manufacturing, and then seeing somewhere where I could apply just the data analysis, it just seemed like, let's give this a shot. Let's see how it goes. And got in, and like I said, data is data. And when I really saw that and got my hands into it, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I can do this. And then branching out from there and just having the opportunity to look at different areas of the business and get more involved. And that was kind of one of the neat things about it being a really small organization. And it was, we're still a small business, but I mean, we were really small back then, less than half the size we are now.
Because you guys are about 70-ish employees, a little more than that.
We were 30 employees at that point, 25, 30 employees at that point. So
Oh, wow.
sort of everybody knew everything, and everybody, if you had an interest as the company was growing, you kind of had an opportunity to go chase that and pursue it. And so that's really kept it interesting.
That's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, because I think it's an interesting journey. How do we go from, quality analyst to general manager? So maybe talk through a little bit about your journey there and how the company sort of fostered growing you through that.
Yeah. So in my time at the company in the last 11 years now, it's gone through 2 changes of ownership. So for the first 5 years, basically, the company was family owned by the family that had founded the company. So back in 2015, family decided it was time for them to exit the business, and they were looking for a new home for it. They had a board of directors at that point, and one of the board members was looking to make the move back to Connecticut, and thought it would be a good opportunity for him and his family to kind of, carry on what the family had started with. At that point, the family, they were kind of the technical experts. They knew the materials, they knew the customers, they knew everything.
Typical kind of small business, family owned, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody does a little bit of everything.
Sure, and you'd expect them to be really engaged with the process and the customers and the employees too, probably.
Mm-hmm. And it was one board member coming in. He wasn't bringing a team in with him. He didn't want to really shake things up. So when he came in, he was really looking for people who knew the business and knew the customers. And being in quality, I knew the product, I knew the customers, young, looking to grow. And he asked basically, what do you want to do? And would you be interested in business development? Again, kind of how the same way I started. It's like, yeah, sure, let's give it a shot and see how it goes.
Was that a big leap? I know I'm sort of interrupting, but was it a big leap to go? Because I don't know that I generally see the connection between somebody who likes to be a data analyst and who also wants to be in business development.
I've never been one to say no to an opportunity.
There you go.
And, I really enjoyed my time in quality, but it's a tough job, being the bearer of bad news. So, telling people, no, you can't do that, or, oh, there's a problem over there. It's tough.
Is it?
I got a lot of respect for the people who make that a lifetime career. And
people didn't really like to see you coming around the corner, because that probably meant there was some rework in their future.
In that intervening time period, I started as data analyst, but had the opportunity to kind of grow, and eventually was the quality manager of the organization. So then it really was, if you saw me, it probably wasn't necessarily the best sign.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. So in that change of ownership, I had an opportunity to kind of leverage what I had learned over the past years, and learning about the product and learning about the customers and markets and applications, and sort of port that over into business development.
How was that transition for you? I mean, was it sort of, I mean, were you already dealing with customers in any way in quality management?
Yeah.
And so did you have those relationships?
Yep. Highly customer-centric organization. So anytime we were working with customers, we really, the sales and engineering team, we're working with them to develop, a comprehensive understanding of their requirements. So we usually had somebody from quality and engineering and operations talking with the customers to gather all those requirements in. So I was working with customers on, as we're developing materials for them, what are your quality requirements? So, learning the technical aspects and the customers and personalities through that. So I already knew them pretty well. So that kind of gave me an edge in supporting the existing customer base, and from there looking for adjacencies with new customers.
That's great. Seems like there actually would be some sort of natural benefits of really deeply understanding the product, understanding the process, understanding the importance of the quality. So when you're sitting down with a customer or potential customer, sort of talking about the value prop, talking about the importance of quality and how the company does it, I bet it
lends a lot of credibility, because it's not the typical salesy approach to like, okay, what's their angle here? I came up through operations, so I understood the importance of the operational aspects of the material, not just, being a pretty face talking to the customer.
So how long were you in, after being in quality for 5 years, how long were you in biz dev?
About almost 6.
And then?
Yeah, and then so another change of ownership. The new owners were coming in and looking for basically somebody who had seen multiple aspects of the business and was looking to grow. And the outgoing owner kind of, put my name up as part of the transition, said, if you don't want to bring somebody in, we got somebody here who's, got the experience, knows the operations, knows the customers, knows how to help grow the business. So might be a good fit for you. And it worked out for me.
Apparently they agreed.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in this role?
So I officially stepped into the role as general manager on October 1st. So it's about 6 weeks in.
How's that going?
So it's all very new. Yeah, it's going great. It's going great. A lot of, learning experience like any other change, but it's been good. It's been exciting.
Yeah, when you think about sort of the transition from, when you went from, working your way up in quality, right, from an analyst all the way to the quality manager, and then going to business development, obviously having some success there as testified to the growth of the company over that same period of time. When you look forward towards this like general manager role, 2 questions if you wouldn't mind elaborating on. One is, what do you see as the areas you need to focus on, or challenges you see ahead to be successful in that role? And I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, it's the strategic thinking. It's looking more than the next 3, 6, 12 months out. Is like, where do we see the future of the company? How are we going to continue to grow the business like we have for the last 60 years? And sort of charting that strategic path for the business, and making sure that we have the necessary resources in place to enable that.
How do you think about the sort of the juxtaposition, right? It's, you got to be thinking about the future, looking at the horizon, but you also have to be watching where you walk so you don't stumble on the way. How do you think about kind of working those 2 angles?
Fortunately, we have an incredibly strong operations team, and they're, laser focused on what's right in front of us, which kind of frees me up to look at kind of the future stuff. So, I really put a lot of trust in them to make sure that we don't step in it, so to speak.
That's awesome. And then sort of my follow-up was, when the new ownership coming in, how's new ownership helping you step into this role? Like, what are they doing? So for other people that are out there listening who are looking at people in their organization, they want to help get to the next level. What's some of the support you've been getting and look forward to getting more of as you grow into this role?
Yeah, fortunately, they're a growth-oriented firm. So, coming in and really bringing in all of the portfolio companies and doing exercises like strategic planning. We've always had a fairly robust strategic planning process, so we're fortunate in that regard. But then bringing that and distilling that into, we use goal deployment to kind of break that 5-year strategic plan down into like a 1-year operating plan. And so having, people who have been through that before and consultants who are, on board and willing to help, so we don't have to sort of figure it out and do it ourselves. And then having a lot of, seasoned finance professionals. So when we got a balance sheet question or, a funding question, having them on tap to sort of step in and kind of walk us through that.
Using some of those core resources, super helpful.
Yep.
That's great. And I do want to get to that, actually. Maybe this is a good way to transition, because you sort of alluded to it. We didn't really talk about it, but the most recent change of ownership was to a PE group. So we went from a family to a PE group. And I'm sure there's people out there who that's happened to them or who are thinking about it. So I think it's a great opportunity to sort of share some lessons learned there. But before we get to the present, probably should start in the past. So I had alluded to the fact that, STM has a bit of a longer history, and it's really fascinating to me. I'm a big history nut, and obviously manufacturing in Connecticut is a big part of that. So I wonder if maybe you could share with the audience what was the precursor to STM and that story.
Yeah, so that was the original company was M. Swift and Sons, and they manufactured gold leaf in Hartford starting in the 1860s. So the Swift family emigrated to the U.S. from England and had kind of established that foundation as gold beaters, which was what they were at that point.
Gold beaters.
Gold beaters, yeah, and it was exactly what it sounds like. They would take gold and hit it with a hammer until it was so thin that you can essentially see through it. And they turn a chunk of gold into gold leaf. And
which was mostly used in decorative applications?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so they brought that trade to the U.S. with them and then started building it up from there. And at that point, in the 1860s, Connecticut was kind of an industrial hub at that point. So they grew that from two brothers to, at the peak of that business, it was employing around 400 people in Hartford. Wow. And that company was in operation from the 1860s until the early 2000s, 2006, I believe. So
for 140 years?
Yep.
Wow.
So in the post-war period, like a lot of industrial companies, Swift had focused their manufacturing capacity on supporting the war effort. And so in the post-war period, they had kind of this interesting technology, going back to the whole advent of radar, and sort of saw this as, maybe this is potentially something which is interesting in the long term that could, benefit our warfighters. And kind of carved it out and sort of ran it under M. Swift and Sons for a few years to see if there really was something there. And when it turned out there was, they sort of spun it off into its own business, and that became Swift Textile Metalizing.
So did the family that ran the original M. Swift and Sons or whatever, did that run the STM business as well?
Yep, until the early 90s, at which point it was sold to a different part of the family, but still within the same family. So
right, because if you're going back to 1840s or 1860s, got a few generations to get up to the 1960s.
It kind of sold to a different branch of the family, so to speak, and then they ran it from the 90s until 2015.
Wow, and then 2015 till now. Yeah, it was funny. I had mentioned to you kind of in our prep call that my great grandfather, who lived in the north end of Hartford, worked at M. Swift for a time, and I think if I'm not mistaken, M. Swift did the gold leaf that's on the dome of the Capitol for the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is M. Swift gold leaf, and I'm sure plenty of other stuff too as well, but just something that I have
most recognizable. Yeah. Yeah, we're really fortunate, and some of the folks that we have working for us now, same thing. They've got aunts, uncles, grandparents who worked at M. Swift and Sons in Hartford years and years ago. So it's interesting having that connection.
Yeah, that is cool. So let's sort of talk about the textile. So we moved to this thing in the post-war effort. You've talked about sort of the radar reflective gear, and I wonder if you could maybe elaborate, on how a textile company remains relevant, in the world of textiles.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just something that I mentioned earlier. It's an eyebrow raiser. For people that are watching it, there's a little bag here on the table we were testing before the show. If anyone who's listening like I do and doesn't always watch, it's a sewn together packet on the side, and it just looks like a gray Velcro bag, but it has some special properties. Why don't you tell us about it? Yeah.
So really, kind of the core competency of the business, it's right in the name. We take textiles and we put metal on them. So we take nylon-based fabrics for the most part, and we put either nickel or silver or some combination thereof onto the fabric to make it electrically conductive. And in our process, you're not losing any of the intrinsic properties of the fabric. So if you start with something which is flexible, breathable, and stretchable, putting metal on it doesn't really alter those properties. So you still have something at the end of the day, which is flexible, stretchable, and breathable, but now is coated in metal and electrically conductive. So that's really kind of the core of it. And we've been really fortunate that that those properties have been desirable from, the 50s with a towable target to 2021 with, wearable medical devices, fabric over foam gaskets inside electronics, EMI shielding in aircraft, EMI shielding in secure work environments, and medical and industrial settings. It's really sort of adapted and grown with the times and remained relevant. So we've been incredibly fortunate in that.
Yeah, that's great. And so this bag on the table, what does this bag do?
So that is it's a portable Faraday cage. It's kind of hard to bring a whole shielded room with you to demonstrate to somebody how it works. So we sort of boiled it down to a little pouch, so to speak, or a blocker bag, which does the same thing as a shielded room or a gasket inside a computer enclosure would, which is block outside electromagnetic energy from whatever is inside it. So it's really just it's a pouch that's lined with our fabric, and when you pop a cell phone or something like that inside there and seal it up, it's basically like ripping the battery out of it. It completely blocks and removes it from any outside energy reaching it.
That's really cool. And so all the products you guys make are all really about that type of electronic shielding. And so, like you mentioned medical wearable devices. How do those two things connect?
Yeah, so it's at its core, you're leveraging the fabric for its conductive properties, whether the conductive properties are reflecting energy which is coming into something or being used to transmit energy. And so in medical devices, typically what we're doing is providing something which is comfortable as an interface between a medical device and then a patient. So kind of a unique aspect of silver is it's skin compatible, unlike a lot of the other metals. So nickel is conductive, but it's skin sensitizing. Copper, you're going to have a nice little green patch afterwards. But silver on fabric, it can be soft and comfortable and wearable, but still provide electrical continuity between the device and the patient.
Wow! So you can use the same product to help conduct electricity as well as to block signals at the same time. That's awesome. So is there a lot of R&D in the business to develop new applications? Do you guys kind of do that on sort of like spec ideas, or do you work with customers and have them? They say, "Here's what I need," and then you guys develop. Well, how does that work?
Yeah, we do a lot of both. As a small business, being customer centric, for the majority of our history, we were really focused on customers. So we had the core technology and we had really a core customer base, and we sort of worked with them to kind of refine and tweak products to make them meet specific customers' need. But more recently, as we've kind of gotten more of an outward focus and more of a growth mindset, we've dived pretty deeply into developing our core technology and looking at what's going to help keep us relevant for the next 66 years.
That's really cool. And so let's talk a little about what it's like to work at Swift. What are the kind of jobs you guys have there? Like, what are the roles that people play?
Yeah. So right now we're about a team of about 70 employees and growing pretty rapidly. So we've got an interesting mix. A growing company, you tend to have a lot of people who wear a lot of different hats. So you've got an engineer who does, supports operations, they support new product development, they support all of those internal projects that every company has. And kind of looking to the future, we're looking at how do we grow that and maybe give, people the opportunity to kind of find a role that fits them. And we're looking at that across the organization. So within engineering, helping build up kind of a core projects engineering function, as well as engineers who are specifically focused on supporting the existing manufacturing operations. And then sort of across the board, we've got our sales staff right now is really like 1-2 people, growing them. So we've got some inside sales folks as well as outside sales, and sort of, maybe instead of people having 4 or 5 hats they wear, maybe paring it back to like 1 or 2.
Some specialization.
Yep.
So do you guys actually like sew the fabrics in Bloomfield?
Yeah, so our core manufacturing operation, we take broadcloth fabrics in. We don't make the fabrics ourselves. We bring fabrics in from mills throughout the U.S., so the majority of our supply chain is right here in the U.S. And we bring those broadcloth fabrics in. We take them, we metalize them in our plant in Bloomfield, and then we sell them as broadcloth fabrics to customers who are then going to do some sort of conversion on it. We don't get into the end product manufacturing or on kind of the beginning of the value chain. We don't make fabrics per se ourselves. It's really, there's too much diversity at either end of that for us to be really effective. So that's why we're bringing fabrics in instead of knitting them or weaving them ourselves. There's a lot of people out there who are really specialized at that and do a really fantastic job at it. Same thing at the other end of the value chain. So our customers are using it in such a broad variety of applications. We couldn't do what they do effectively like they do. So we're really providing the material to the experts.
So is your customer the end user or somebody before the end user who's making like this bag, for example?
It depends. In some cases, it is sort of a converter who's bringing it into something, but in some cases, typically in like medical devices, we see this. It's the end user who's bringing together a bunch of different components and then manufacturing and assembling it themselves.
And like, who would that customer be? Like, as an example, not a name, I'm not saying, but like, industry or like hospital. I'm just trying to figure out what that.
Yeah, the large medical device manufacturers.
Got it. Okay.
They're really their design teams are designing a device or a system and then speccing out all the components that go into it, and then they're looking at us as sort of a component provider. Even though it's really a material, they're able to manipulate it easily and turn it into a component within their manufacturing.
Got it. So the specialization that you guys really bring to the table is understanding how to make the metal part of the fabric, so you get the same component, the same properties the fabric always had, but with this like extra capability. And so the technology you guys look at is how to get more capabilities into either maybe more fabrics or different different
metals.
Different metals.
And then providing the application engineering to those customers, because they're experts in what they do, and they think that what we do might benefit their project or their process, but they're not experts in it by any stretch. And so bringing our engineers in to sort of explain to them what the materials are, how they can use them, how they can be integrated into their product, and then taking feedback from them and maybe adjusting what we do to make it better suited to what they do. So
really providing that solution, like, hey, they're like, we think this could work for us, not exactly sure which thing we need or whatever. And that's exactly where Swift STM can come in and sort of say, well, here, this is how you could do it. And then it's either something that you already have or maybe a slight variation. Boom, now you've got a solution, and now that becomes part of their ongoing product. Smart. Where is you guys have talked about a lot of growth just in terms of headcount. What strategies do you guys use to find people to fill these headcounts, in your engineering and in back office and manufacturing? Like, where are you guys doing that?
That has been a real challenge. Historically, we've relied on, within our direct labor manufacturing operations, temp to hire agencies and things like that. And we had a real problem going that route because we weren't getting people who understood what they were, kind of the industry they were getting into. They showed up and they heard textiles and we got all sorts of different, like, I thought I was going to be making wedding dresses. And that, totally unrelated to what we do.
Maybe there's somebody who wanted a very specialized wedding dress.
Maybe. Yeah, we could do that.
That's possible.
And recognizing that just wasn't effective. It was expensive. We had a lot of turnover. It wasn't good for the culture and the morale of the organization. So we really turned towards a referral program. We've got a lot of really solid associates who have been with us for a long time, 10 to 20 years in some cases, and looking at them and saying, look, we're a growing organization. You've been here for a long time. Do you know anybody who wants to come work here? And that's been really phenomenally successful for us. Bringing in qualified candidates, giving the associates a sense of ownership in the growth of the company, and, bringing in people who are pre-screened, who know what we're doing and want to work here.
Oh, that's great. So when you say like a referral programs, there's like paid referrals? Yeah. So how do you guys implement that? You sort of educate folks, here's what we're looking for, who do you know, and then bring them in?
We post a job description. In a lot of cases with the direct labor folks, they know what they do and they see the job description. They go, okay, we're looking for somebody who does something like what I do. Oh, I know my, neighbors, a friend of a friend or somebody like that is looking for something similar and would be a good fit, and referring them back. And like I said, we were paying, agencies and temp to hire firms. I mean, it's expensive. And it's not necessarily always qualified, and whether they work out or not, we're still paying. So why pay an agency when I can pay my employees basically the same thing? And I get somebody who's already, basically pre-qualified and knows what we're doing, and I'd much rather give it to them than some outside firm.
Well, yeah, you get the double win, right? Because you probably get a better qualified candidate.
Absolutely.
The hit rate's probably higher.
It's much, much higher.
And you're generating some extra loyalty from the person who gave you the referral. So
major sense of ownership.
Oh yeah, and even the fourth benefit, right? Now they're probably committed to helping make this person successful. They're going to go out of their way to introduce them around. So you're really kind of creating a nice positive boost there. So that's worked in direct labor. Has that been working at all in some of the other, like maybe in engineering or any of the other quality areas? Yeah,
we're just starting to kind of bring that over into the professional disciplines as well. Again, historically, we relied on recruiting, technical recruiters, and we'd had success there, and it worked. So we never really saw the sense in doing the referral program, just because we didn't have as many openings. And we were having good luck with the agencies. But job market now, things are just crazy. We're having these recruiters have more openings than they have candidates, and if you're not bringing in a whole mess of people all at once, you're not getting the focus that somebody else might be. So, and that hasn't diminished our need for qualified professional staff. So we've really turned, utilize the same approach we did with the direct labor folks and said, look, if you know somebody, in your engineering pool, look at your classmates. Anybody you went to school with looking for a job, somebody that you know what you do. We're looking for somebody who does something kind of like what you do. You know anybody who might be interested in that?
Right.
So we're starting to see some luck with that. It's something we've really rolled out in the last couple of months. And
trying to get that off the ground.
We're starting to get some traction with that and seeing resumes coming in.
That's great. When you think about what sort of the advantages to working at Swift versus other places, or sort of what the unique opportunity is, what do you tell people? What do people think about when they think about the benefits of working there? So
the first thing right off the bat is textiles. Do I really want to work in that? And then we get into explaining them, yeah, it's textiles, but look, it's growing. We've been here for 66 years and we're not slowing down. We're speeding up, if anything. Explaining them kind of the cool aspects of the technology that we do. And then, once we get past that, is, giving them the opportunity to have a meaningful impact on what they do. We're still a relatively small organization, or a very flat organization. And so when somebody comes in, they can really see the impact of what they're doing. What I did today benefited a customer, or it benefited the organization, allowed us to grow and achieve some objective that we're working on. So seeing the feedback between what they do and how it affects the outcome is really powerful.
Yeah, kind of giving them that opportunity. Does your story, do you think, resonate? Because I'm just putting myself in a position of somebody who's kind of looking in and saying, wow, the guy that's running this whole place started out of college in quality. Does that story come up, and do you think it helps?
I think it's starting to, especially with some of the younger engineers who are looking at, a referral is kind of a big deal for somebody like that, because their name is associated with the success or lack of success with that person. So it's like, do I want to refer somebody in who's young and fresh out of school, and are they really going to have the opportunity here that the job description says they do? And then they look at me and they'll go, okay, well, maybe they do. Maybe they do.
In Alex Smith, all things are possible.
Yeah.
No, that's really, I think it's a really powerful story, and nothing, it's the old saying, right? Facts tell and stories sell. And when you have something right in front of you, somebody who's done it where you are is pretty cool. You guys partner with any of the schools around? I mean, we've got University of Hartford, we've got, UConn, Trinity, the number of the community colleges definitely have manufacturing and engineering programs. You guys found any success in that?
So we've worked with UConn a little bit, recruiting out of their engineering program. Again, it was, we're up against some pretty big names around here, so it's been tough for us. We've had a little bit of success with it, and now that we're really growing quite a bit more rapidly now. We're taking another look at that. But yeah, it was tough going into those job fairs, and we got little old Swift who's got an engineering staff of 8 against some big name firm who they're looking to bring in a class of 2 or 3 or 400 new engineers.
It's tough to stack up a little bit.
But every once in a while we'd find the right candidate who had either come out of a firm like that and they were looking for somewhere they could have more of a direct impact, or somebody who very self-aware and realized, what, maybe I don't want to work and be, a nameless face in an organization.
I was wondering about that. Do you think that when you talk to UConn, has your experience been that most kids are like kind of maybe starry-eyed about that like huge organization, and they're going to have to kind of go through the process of kind of self-selecting who does and doesn't want that up front? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you maybe get a little more luck out of someone who's been doing that for a couple of years and realized, you know what, like a flat organization where I can see the beginning, middle, and end of the journey of a product might be more my speed.
That's really what we get a lot of when we look at our candidates. It's people who have been in the industry for 2 to 5 years and gone, wow, maybe I don't want to be in that type of setting. And then it's also kind of the later career professionals who've been doing it for 20 years, and they're just, sick of the corporate the bureaucracy and the grind of it all, and they want to get back to basics more or less, and a manager who wants to maybe have a bit more hands-on engagement with what they do.
Yeah, but there's a lot of small manufacturers in Connecticut, which there are thousands of them.
Yes.
Sort of finding that same thing. I know we're like running out a little bit of time, but I did want to talk a little bit about the journey from family to family to, private equity or financial ownership. So I guess the first instance, maybe you could just sort of share your journey. I mean, there's not a ton of people out there who've gotten to experience 3 ownership transitions in a fairly short period of time. So just curious, your perspective from a smaller business, how was it and how did it end up?
Yeah. I guess it's equal parts exciting and scary. So when I started with the company, I was interviewed, after, a couple of cycles by the owner, the person who was going to sign my paycheck. And I mean, as me, fresh out of college, that was eye-opening. Like, oh, wow, I'm, reportable to this person. But it was nice because you get to see like, okay, this is who I'm going to be interacting with at the end of the day. And then, growing up through that and watching the company grow. And then, anytime there's a change of ownership, there's always a little bit of uncertainty. But it basically went from family to another known entity and a board member who was familiar with the business. They weren't bringing a team in. So that transition was fairly seamless. It was actually they were both of the general managers at that point. It was like we went from somebody named Steve to somebody named Steve. So it was fairly in name and culture. It was fairly seamless. This more recent transition where the former owner was exiting and retiring, no private group to kind of step in and take over at that point. He was looking really for the right fit for the company. So he brought in some of the staff at that point to kind of go through the acquisition process. And, he's like, ultimately, I'm retiring. Ideally, you guys are staying. So this has got to be the right fit for you as well as the right exit for me. So, going through the process of looking at private equity acquirers as well as strategic acquirers and finding somebody that was going to be the right home for the company, who was going to, take advantage of 66 years worth of brand history and the strength and the talent of the people that we have. We were very fortunate in where we landed that we found an acquirer who was going to basically respect that and, continue to operate us as a standalone business under our own brand with our own people, basically doing what we do. And just now with the financial and talent backing, if there's something that we want to go do, we've got the backing to go do that.
That's really cool. So were you part of the selection, the seller, the buyer, whatever selection process?
Yep.
Wow. That's really an interesting and smart way to do it. How many people from the business were sort of involved in that group besides the person that was exiting?
There were 6 of us.
Wow. So
that's
almost 10% of the whole business. That's really strong.
We really had somebody from every major functional area. So finance, sales, operations, engineering, contracts. It was really a bit of everybody. And it was a really interesting dynamic because we it was a two-way street. So the acquirers were coming to us to learn about the business, and then we were turning around and it was okay. Now it's our chance to learn a little bit about you and get to meet them face to face and say, ultimately, like I said, Steve's exiting, but I'm staying. So, what's this going to mean for the company in the future, and how's this all going to play out? Which was really nice for us.
That is really nice. And so, I mean, you obviously went through a bunch of different suitors, let's say.
Yeah.
And if this is not if this is okay to ask, I guess, was the decision unanimous at the end on the selection that was made?
Pretty close to it. Everybody who was involved in the acquisition, it really came down to basically we had ranked and said, here's what we think of everybody. At the end of the day, the top three, we were all really in alignment on. Number one, everybody agreed on. Number two, everybody agreed on. Number three, it was like 80% agreement. And then it was, one or two positions off for everybody else down from there. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, we knew, who we really liked. And then we gave that to the owner. And then it was up to him to figure out, financially what made sense for him. And, we all ended up with somebody that we agreed was going to be a good fit for the company.
So it worked out.
Yep.
So it was whatever came in at the end and was decided on, all worked out. And so what was the acquiring companies? What's their approach to dealing with STM and how are you finding that?
Yeah, so it's a private equity backed operating company, and they're very growth focused. And so they recognize that we've been doing this for a little while. We've been successful. We've been growing. Don't screw up a good thing. Enable the success and provide the resources where it's necessary. But they don't have to come in and bring folks in to run the business. And just let them do their thing.
Let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And so do they just sort of hold you accountable to targets that you guys sort of say, hey, this is our top line growth target. This is our gross and net margin. And then sort of if we deliver that, we're in good shape.
Yeah, exactly. They look at a few things. One, do you have a strategic plan, 5 years? Do you have an operating plan for the next year? Look at the budget, revenue, and EBITDA. If they agree that we're not sandbagging it, they hired us because we've been growing. They expect us to grow. If all of a sudden the budget says we're not going to grow, they got some questions at that point. But if it's reasonable, okay, here it is.
Get after it.
Go after it. Yeah.
That's awesome. You seem really, really pleased with how it's working out.
It's working out really well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Alex, it's been super fun talking to you. It's been great kind of hearing about Swift. Anyone who's been kind of reading about them, there's been some stuff in the paper about the old factory, and it's kind of got rebuilt and given a new life.
Yeah, incredible what they're doing there.
Absolutely incredible. And it's cool that beyond that building being repurposed, that's sort of the offshoot, still is not just around, but thriving.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So I'm going to move to our rapid fire round of questions before we wrap this up. Are you ready?
Okay. Yep.
All right, my man. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Nice. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Ooh, that's tough. Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Ooh, staycation. There's a lot to do around here. There's a lot of good stuff.
I agree with that. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Sports car.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Do I have a favorite business book? Ooh, there's a lot of good ones out there. Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, it's a good one, especially if you're just going through some changes in the business. Yeah. That's a good one to remember. If you had to do something other than be the vice president and general manager of Swift Textile Metalizing, and it could be anything in the world, but it had to be something different, what would you do?
Can I go back to business development? That was a lot of fun.
You sure can. Business. That's what you want to go back to?
Yeah, plan B, race car driver.
Is that right?
Yep.
I
love sports car racing.
It's like Formula One, NASCAR. What's your anything?
European, like endurance racing.
Okay.
24 hours of Le Mans.
Really?
Yep. In a dream world. Yep.
That's where you're at.
I
nice.
couldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Yep.
All right, cool. Hey, man, maybe that's your second career. What's one thing, Alex, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
Oh, I guess, don't be afraid of a setback here or there. If you persevere through it, generally you're better off for it at the end of the day. Life's going to throw curveballs at you here or there, and if you can kind of manage through them, you'll come out all right on the other side.
Yeah, amen to that. What's something else that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you went back to tell young Alex and he'd listen to you, you think he'd really benefit from?
Yeah, that's a big ask. Be patient. There's a lot of things that you'd like to get done. They don't all need to be done right now, though. Take a breath. It'll get done at some point.
Yeah, don't overload.
Yep.
Alex, it's been awesome having you on.
It's been a pleasure, Ari.
Before I end it, I did want to just say congratulations on the birth of Teddy.
Thank you.
Really cool. Number 3 in the family.
3, yep.
So congratulations on that, and wishing you and the folks over at STM all the best.
Thank you very much.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct, a CompassMSP company.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.